and welcome to Report from the Climate Crisis. My name is Kameel Nasr, and we here every other week, and we're talking about climate. This time I have a great pleasure of having Jule Manitz here with us, and she's representing Extinction Rebellion, also called XR. Welcome to the show, Jule.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say that I want to ask you a little about your past. You know, you haven't heard it yet, but she speaks with a German accent. So you're from Germany, right?
Yes, I grew up in Germany. I came to Boston in 2016, just before everything became funny. And
funny?
Well, politically. And before that, I grew up in Germany, lived all over the place. And and now I'm here.
So was it in Germany that you first learned about the climate? We understood that we have a climate problem.
Yeah, I think even in primary school they were teaching us about very simple things about the climate crisis, consider very simple answers that were still available in the 90s, like do you recycling and all these kind of things. And that did we are coming to a much more urgent state right now. So learning about the severity of the climate crisis over the years. Really having bits and pieces until I really focused my activism towards the climate crisis specifically.
So tell me, you joined XR, Extinction Rebellion. Tell us a little about the organization. Where did it start? Mm-hmm. It's a new organization.
A fairly new organization, yes. So Extinction Rebellion started actually in the UK, and we are in Boston since 2019, April 2019, I believe. I joined the organization in the fall of 2019, and COVID didn't really help activism. It's true for a lot of branches, but we are recovering well after the pandemic and do have a bunch of actions, and actually very successful actions also in Boston now.
And how did you get involved, and what drew you to XR?
The first action that I participated was a really fun one. I happened to end up on XR blocked a bridge to the seaport back in fall in 2019, and that was an action that I found very uplifting, because despite the severity and the urgency and the whole sadness and depression that can the climate crisis cause in people, there was a lot of art, there was music. You happened to be in a protest with a bunch of strangers, and you made a lot of friends. It was very, very uplifting, and still raising awareness through disrupting business as usual.
Yeah, so basically, have you used the word civil disobedience yet? That's what Extinction Rebellion is all about, civil disobedience.
Yes.
Bringing change through civil disobedience,
yes.
Right?
So Extinction Rebellion as a whole movement is a non-violent international movement that exists right now not only in the UK, in Boston, but all over the US and all over the world. And we are using non-violent civil disobedience to disrupt business as usual, to force the governments and businesses toward taking the action that is needed to avoid the worst of the climate crisis.
So Extinction Rebellion, you said it started in London, mm-hmm. and it was very effective in London. It changed the government policy by closing down the whole of London. Am I right about that? Yeah. Yes. They asked for a climate emergency and they got it, and then they asked for or demanded or sat in the streets until they got a precise timetable of reducing carbon. What has Extinction Rebellion XR? What has it done in the United States?
So in the United States, specifically in Boston, let's speak specifically in Boston since we are located here in the greater Boston area, we have had, for instance, the Seaport Bridge that was blocked back in 2019. Then we had a little bit of smaller actions throughout the pandemic, because mass actions obviously do not mix well with the pandemic. So we have dropped a banner from the Citgo sign asking for climate justice now, and really reminding the people of Boston that they are represented by Citgo, a fossil fuel company, and that doesn't really fit with the lifestyle that I see in Boston. We have had other actions. We have dropped a boat in front of Governor Baker's house to call him out for all the environmental justice crimes that he has committed.
He was particularly angry about that, I think. Yes.
Yes. So climate activists just don't know how to park, I guess. So it was a pink boat that we bought to in front of his house. We went several times to the state house, his workplace, to protest his policies, and he has been blocking for travel legacy for a long time. He has been committing a lot of climate crimes, in our view, by really specifically targeting environmental justice communities, low income and immigrant communities. So we took the message home because it hits us at home.
Right. So now we have a new governor, and you have hope?
We'll see. We could see, unfortunately, quite some development towards greenwashing her messaging, and we will watch it, and we hopefully will keep her on her heels.
Reporting on the climate by the media, has it changed?
Yes and no. We can see some of the developments. So one of the demands of Extinction Rebellion is tell the truth, because we believe the number of people who are already dying of the climate crisis every day is enormous. So it should be, if we really understand the urgency of the climate crisis, it should be on the front page of every newspaper every day, because it is affecting us and it is affecting the rest of the world. It is not on the front page. If we are lucky, we have achieved that. We have been seeing some sort of elevating the climate messaging, so it became its own chapter, for instance, in the Globe and other newspapers. However, it's not enough. It should be on the front page. People still don't know how severe the situation is and how urgent we have to react to it.
Well, I was on a meeting with the Globe staff about this, and I would say that they have really changed their attitudes and their. It's much better now. Okay, I understand this. It's not anywhere where it should be, but it's much better. They have a staff now, and they're dedicating their time. And I think Extinction Rebellion was the cause of that, because the Extinction Rebellion went into their offices a couple of times.
Yes.
And I was there, and then we and they took it. They understood just what it is. So is that the best way to go, through civil disobedience as opposed to legislative action, going to Beacon Hill or to other state legislatures and asking for change? Is that civil disobedience the best way?
So let's put it like that. Nothing else has worked. The knowledge about the climate crisis or the climate change is happening since the 70s. Legislation has been there, but it is not going fast enough. And we have right now, if we are lucky, we have 6 years left to transition to 100% renewables, and these are conservative estimates, right? That means, if we are transitioning within that 6 years into 100% renewables, we have a 2/3 chance to keep the planet livable. And that, when it comes to survival, we shouldn't take chances. We should go and transition to renewables right now, because that is, even if we keep the planet livable, the conditions under it is livable. They are not any pretty.
Well, 2/3 of a chance. What does that mean exactly?
Well, that means that the IPCC report, which is a compromise between a lot of countries, a lot of scientists, and I don't know how you go through your life, but compromises are usually going to like the least agreeable thing. So having said that, it's a compromise, and in the past, climate scientists have been forced to be rather conservative how they are in their predictions because of the created controversy whether the climate crisis is real or not.
So you're a scientist.
Yes, I am.
I picked that up when you were speaking in front of people. And how do you feel as a scientist going forward? Are you optimistic that we're going to change, or are you pessimistic?
I don't know. Most of the time, I'm pretty pessimistic, and I'm a numbers person. So I have a PhD in math and statistics, and normally I calculate something, see the numbers, draw the conclusion, and act accordingly. And for me, the big divergence between these two, between the science and our behavior, is something that makes me really, really depressed, and it even makes me more depressed to see the reality in the numbers and see how people continue with their business as usual. It's not any, it really makes me depressed and really makes me almost crazy, like not getting to see that people actually adapt their behavior considering the crisis that we are going through.
So when you do civil disobedience, are you aiming to change public perception, or are you aiming to change the legislative agenda?
So our actions do have different dimensions. One of it is outreach, one of it is disruption, and then another dimension could be visioning. And that means each of the actions can have all of the three components. But, one of them could be like more in the center than the other. Having said that, the outreach and changing public perception, the tell the truth demand that we have as Extinction Rebellion is one dimension. The second demand is act now, which is forcing the government to actually take change, effective change right now. The third one is a citizen assembly, really making sure that people get included in the decision process. And the fourth demand, very important, is a just transition, really making sure that those communities who are hit the hardest and have been disrespected in the past are put first when it comes to climate action.
So let me ask you this: you have earrings of Extinction Rebellion. Can you talk about where that symbol comes from and what it means? You
yes.
See the little earring there?
So that is an hourglass, and it actually represents how time is running out to act on the climate crisis. And obviously, we also have a symbol, for instance, as a climate clock that is really counting the time according to the IPCC report, how time is running out towards closing the window of opportunity to actually act to stay below the 1.5 degrees of Celsius. If that is even possible anymore is another question. But even if we have blasted through, it is really important to make sure that it is every half degree is worth fighting for, because the situation that we will be living with, or our children will be living with, the next generation, will be with every degree exponentially worse. Yes.
So this is a report from the climate crisis. I'm Kameel Nasr, and we broadcast every couple of weeks here. And I'm having the great pleasure of speaking with Jule Manitz, who is a very articulate member of Extinction Rebellion. You had before, Jule, you had some statistics that we were sharing together with it. Do you want to share some more about where we are, what we need to do? It's not good, right? The statistics kind of are not happy ones.
Unfortunately, the statistician almost never delivers the numbers that people want to hear. So we are currently at 1.2 Celsius warming, global warming, and considering the delayed fact of the carbon emissions that we have right now, some scientists scientists actually already believe, many scientists already believe, that we already have blasted through the 1.5 critical threshold of opportunity. And that threshold is actually, after that threshold, scientists expect to kick off a spiral of irreversible climate disasters. And unfortunately, or fortunately, 90% of that has been absorbed by the ocean, which means that is actually masking the biggest impacts of the climate disasters so far, and also has the strongest effect on the ocean, where we as humans do provide least attention to. We are most ignorant to the diversity in the ocean.
That's right.
And so currently we are on a pathway towards 4 degrees warming.
4 degrees, which would be basically unlivable.
It's not completely unlivable. It allows the Earth to have a capacity for 1 billion humans. We currently have blasted through 8 billion people, which means a pretty severe reduction of humanity. And considering the inequality that is already existing on the Earth, the sparseness of resources will get much more severe. And considering that the G20 have admitted so far 80% of the carbon emissions, they are having disproportionate responsibilities, but the other countries are suffering the most already right now.
That's right. Poor countries suffer what rich countries have done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How could you change that? It's part one of the last thing you talked about, the last point was a just transition of XR. Mm-hmm. How could we achieve that? What does that mean?
So we will have to, one thing that was pushed at COP27, even though it got barely any attention, was thinking of climate reparations. Yeah. So making sure that the rich countries are taking proportional responsibility for their responsibility. So responsibility, in my understanding, has two parts. The responsibility of doing something, but also taking responsibility for what you have caused. That is something that is unfortunately not very fashionable. But locally, we could also look at our environmental justice communities and making sure that we are helping when it comes to a just transition to overcome problems like EJ communities facing higher risk of having heat islands, have a higher risk of flooding and storm surges, but also being more likely to have a broken sewage system and having less resources to adapt or grow food for the food crisis that we are facing.
Mm. Yeah, so in the last COP meeting that was in Sharm el-Sheikh, it was pretty bad in terms of really, they didn't really agree on much. They were supposed to agree to give $100 billion a year to poorer countries. That basically hasn't happened, right? This last year, I think they gave 13 billion or something like that. It's a scandal. I'll tell you another statistic is that 3 countries, I think it was Denmark, Scotland, and Belgium, they wanted to give money to poorer countries for specific projects. They came up with $15 million as opposed to the $100 billion that we have. This is the biggest year that we've had for coal and for emissions in general. Yeah, are we failing as resistance organizations, climate conscious organization? Are we failing?
We are failing in so many perspectives. I mean, carbon emission, which is the worst since ever reported, and but also we have 9 planetary boundaries. It's not only carbon emissions, so we are failing on so many fronts. It's really, really impossible right now. And what we really need is a systemic change. And we do not, changes along the edges don't make it anymore. We are in a situation, we have so much urgency and so much severity, and we see the results already. we have to understand, like, even the 15 million is a joke.
Yeah.
We have to understand that climate mitigation, reducing carbon emission right now, getting off carbon right now is extremely important, because anything that we can spend right now is going to be much cheaper than all the carbon, the climate crisis effects that we will face.
Yeah.
So anything that we can put in right now in money. And I mean, first of all, it's very clear the obvious things to do, the very obvious things to stop building fossil fuel infrastructure. And in Massachusetts, we continue to build pipelines. Yeah. So we are doing this right now. Eversource is building right now, proposing a pipeline in Springfield Longmeadow. And hearings are happening right on Wednesday in front of the EFSB.
Yeah, yeah.
And Eversource has good friends at the EFSB.
So you said systemic change. Mm-hmm. You define that. What does that mean? Change in the government, change the capitalist system? What does that mean?
So my personal opinion is that an exponential growth curve, and now I'm coming with a very sciencey explanation, we'll break it down in a second,
right, yeah.
But an exponential growth curve, as capitalism is assuming, needs to level off at some point. Every growth curve in nature looks like something like this, and it levels off at some point. Capitalism assumes exponential growth. Yes. So we need to level off to keep a sustainable future.
Are you saying that we need to buy less things, to produce less things? What are you saying?
What I'm thinking is we need to come together as communities to share, to repair things, to make things repairable. As we sell things, there should be a requirement that it makes it repairable. We as a community should come together and share the resources and tools. So let's assume 10 households share one set of tools. Let's say grass mower or whatever. Yeah. I don't use it, but in the burbs you probably need it. And if 10 houses share one, you only need to use 10%. And if that thing becomes repairable, we have a much better sustainable way of actually using that.
So would that hurt shareholders? Would that hurt the New York Stock Exchange, the Nasdaq?
I don't care much about the Nasdaq. I care about the people coming together as a community, because it would not hurt them. Right. It actually would improve their life, because they're coming together and bring to the table whatever they can bring to the table. So how would it actually improve our life, and not how would it hurt our life? That's the big question that we should ask ourselves, because the fewest of all of us are shareholders of the Nasdaq.
Right, but there are a lot of things that we can do right now, which is putting in more solar and wind generators, electric vehicles. My last show was about electric vehicles. There's a lot of things that we can do. That what do we need to push us to do this? Do we need another disaster? Do we need better leadership? Do we need more people sitting on the streets like you do, stopping traffic?
We do need more people doing things like us, because, yes, we can keep people very busy to compost and try to figure out recycling, and join your local Facebook Buy Nothing group, or whatever it takes to build that small community to actually share tools and resources. But what we need is a systemic change, and enough people disrupting business as usual to get that drastic change that we need right now.
Well, that's interesting you say enough people, because a lot of times in a rally there's 50 people, 100 people. That's not enough people, is it? You really need 100,000 people. In fact, it's in the Extinction Rebellion handbook. 50 to 100,000 people shut down the place. How are we going to get these people? These people interested. What is it going to take?
Very clearly, there are a lot of groups out there who are working on various fronts of inequality and things that are really closely intersecting with the climate crisis, and coalition building will be one of the key the keys that really brings people together. And we are building these, and we are working on this. We are working very closely with a lot of other groups to get these coalitions strong and trustful as possible.
So, in the remaining couple of minutes that we have here, what's the future of climate activism? What's the future of Extinction Rebellion and the other groups, 350.org, which I also work with? What's got to be their future in order to bring about the systemic change you're talking about?
So, I mean, you have been referring to research that has been done just here down the road at Harvard, specifically about the theory that is behind civil disobedience. So that says that we need about 3.5%, and that's about, right, these are all directions, of the people joining a civil disobedient movement such as Extinction Rebellion.
3.5%
of the population. And we can agree that most of the people in Massachusetts are very favorable of our cause.
Oh,
a lot of people like to have a livable planet for some reason. Sorry for the sarcasm. But it is actually that we need 3.5% of the people joining the movement, and that can also happen through coalition building in a non-violent action. And that means obviously not that everyone needs to get arrested themselves in one of these movements. There are also a lot of people who are helping with support functions. So I always say, like, every person who gets arrested probably has like 10 people supporting the action in the background, which people may not see it.
And is getting arrested kind of the object?
Unfortunately, in the past, it has not been very successful to go to the State House and hold up a sign. Unfortunately, we have to raise awareness and really make clear how serious we are with our demand with climate action now, that we are willing to literally put our bodies on the line. And that has been proven very successful in the research that has been done at Harvard, but also that has been really successful in the civil rights movement.